Well, sorry, I didn't mean to make a quiet entrance. Thanks everyone for coming. I do apologize. I have a little bit of a cough. I'm not sick. Sickness is gone. This is just how colds go for me. I just have a cough for all of eternity until next year when I get the cold again. So I'll try to keep it low. Okay, I'll cough on you. Welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. This is the Remix Austin Meetup, November 6th, 2024 edition. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope, yeah, good turnout. Thanks everyone for coming. Yeah, there you go. That's exciting. If you don't know what Remix is, I always like to start with a quick just explanation, high level. So Remix is a way to build websites most simply. More technically, it's a React meta framework. It's a way to build websites with React, and specifically gives you access to things like server-side rendering, client-side rendering, and data loading patterns, and all sorts of good stuff. We meet every month here on the first Wednesday of every month. Tonight we have a pretty light agenda. Ryan is going to be giving his first talk at this meetup called Beginning React Query. Super excited about that. He's going to be talking about data loading patterns and React Query and whatnot, which will be really cool. Before we do that, though, just want to run through some kind of quick, just high level, what's going on in Remix world kind of stuff. So I should have said I work on the Remix team. So if you have any questions or feedback very directly to the Remix team, please let me know, or happy to answer any questions later on. A couple of things that we've done recently. We had a little bit of a brand update. So if you're into like designing logos, we decided to do a deep dive on like how our logo was built and some changes that we recently made on it. So this is a fun little quick dive into that. And also this is our new little logo. So stop using the old one because we have a new one now. That's nice. Also, if you didn't know, you can go to remix.run. Nope, not that one. Sorry. You can go to React Router. If you right click on that, that gets you to our brand page. So if you ever do need our assets, that's where to find them. You don't need to do anything more complicated out. Same with the Remix one. So just for your content creators out there, please use the right logos. We get really annoyed when people use the wrong logos. I recommend reading it. It's a fun read. I really like our designer. This was his first contribution to our blog. Other things, there's not much going on in Remix specifically right now because we're working right now on the release of React Router 7. So if you're not really familiar with that, the story there, you can actually check out reactrouter.com/dev as our pre-release of React Router 7 and all sorts of docs on it. It's still not perfect. We're really working on the docs pretty heavily right now, but oh man, I forgot to admit the participants. Oh well. We're working pretty heavily on these docs right now. But if you really like playing with experimental stuff, you've been excited about Remix or React Router 7 and what that means and wanting to play with it, I definitely recommend going to these docs and playing around with it. I think if you go to the installation, this is definitely up to date, so it should be easy. We just released this, I think, today or yesterday to CLI for it. So constant changing as we speak, but it's pretty fun. I think that's all that I got for now. So Ryan, if you're ready, we'll switch it over to you.
A little bit about me. I've been a software engineer doing React for 5 years now. Been doing React my entire career. Another fun fact, my first job was at Silicon Valley Bank, and I currently work at Acorn Labs because, developers don't work there anymore. So my experience with Remix is pretty small. I've been using it for about 2 months. I work for an AI company, and now that OpenAI has switched their stack to Remix, now we're switching our stack to Remix. So it's been awesome. Been learning a lot about it. But so one conclusion that I've come to is that we can finally ditch React Query. So React Query has been probably my go-to library for all things state management, API caching, things like that. I've been a huge avid proponent for React Query. And now that I've kind of started in that with Remix, I've kind of found some things that Remix actually is able to handle without importing the library and giving some more benefits. So I made an app, as we all do. If I can find it. Here we go. So we're going to get this running. If you know the app, you know the app. Little inside joke for those who do. But so we have an e-commerce website. So it's very remixy. Everything's great. you know, we've got some tags. You can do some filtering for various types of pants. We have a cart. You can add items to the cart. You get some nice animations. It updates the cart in the corner. Not sure if you saw that. We can view our cart and remove things from the cart, add them, clear the cart. It's about as basic as an e-commerce website gets. And so if we take a quick look at the code, let's add this a little bit. One thing I didn't anticipate was all this stuff from Zoom blocking my view. Okay, so we got a few different pages here. We have a cart page, a shop page, and our layout. If you're familiar with Remix, you understand how nested routing works. I'm not going to get too much into that, but the layout wraps the page. And then we have a cart and the shop page. The shop page is just the page with the pants. So if we look at them, we've got some nice loaders here. You know, we're preventing waterfalls. We're loading things, all the data is server side, and we get some pretty nice benefits. For example, if I disable JavaScript, right? This page still works just as you'd expect, minus the loading pages. So this is extremely, what's the term? Progressive enhancement, that's the word. So we've got all of our progressive enhancement. We have server-side rendering. All of our data is always up to date. It's fantastic. So I'm going to re-enable that. But there's a couple of things that are wrong with this, right? So the first thing is just generally the user experience. So if I go back to my slideshow. So if I go back to my slideshow, you know, this is great because we've done it like the Remix way. You know, we're using loaders, we're using actions. We've only got data directly from the server, no waterfalls, progressive enhancement, server-side rendering. Feels nice and remixy. The problem is we've got some painful load times. Now that's pretty exaggerated because I added a 1-second delay to every API that we call. So when you add that with the action that updates the data and the loader that fetches the data, you've got a 2-second. So there's no caching and there's no waterfalls, but it's just kind of a little janky. So how can we snap things up? Well, normally I would have gone for SWR or React Query or use SWR or however you want to use it. And so I chose to use SWR just because it's a little simpler and I think it works for this use case a little bit better. So what is SWR? So for those of you who don't know, SWR just means stale while revalidating, which essentially means the client has a cache. At each cache key, every time you make an API request, it's going to fill that cache key. So that way, the next time you make that same API request, it will be able to pull from the cache. You'll be able to get your data instantly. It just makes everything a little snappier, a little faster. And then after pulling from the cache, it's going to revalidate in the background to make sure that whatever is displayed is up to date. That's the long and short of it, or that's the short of it. If you want to learn more about how SWR works, you can read any of the documentation for Cell's implementation of it or Tanstack React Query. Both are great libraries. So let's see how it looks. So if we go over here, I'm going to close this and I have another branch. Check out to the SWR branch. We're going to have to reinstall, so update the dependencies. And let's see what happens here. So there we go. We've got this. It starts off looking pretty much exactly the same. You might notice a little spinner there. But other than that, it's the exact same website. The only difference is if you saw I clicked on casual in blue, if I go back, I'm getting data immediately. There's no loading screen. It just is really snappy. Second I click the button, the data shows up because since I went there before, it's cached the data. I don't have to refetch it just to display the same information. So that's awesome. That's all great. I can still do everything, add to cart, and you'll see the data updates right up here. I can go to the cart and notice I didn't have to load it even on the first render because when I added to cart, I'll show you kind of what happens. In the network tab, when I add to cart, you'll see I do the shop data and that triggers the action. And then you'll see this cart fetches, and that cart fetch is what's updating this count right up here. And so because it's been fetched, it's been cached. So now when I go to the page, I don't need to load it. So really useful use case for kind of how SWR works. But there are some drawbacks to this. I guess we'll go over the pros. So the obvious pros are we get a little boost of reactivity. You know, user gets that warm, tingly feeling of importance every time they click something. APIs are cached granularly, so we can decide when data is out of sync We can decide when it needs to get updated, all that. But there are also some cons. So if we go back here, and I tried to do the server-side rendering, so we disable JavaScript. Well, now we get a blank page because we've cut out everything that would be done on the server and replaced it with a client-side cache. And so this can't run on the client, or sorry, this code can't run on the server. We can't load the data. We can't server-side render. So there are definitely some issues there. And the other thing you might have noticed early on is that we have some pretty obvious waterfalls. So when I first load the page, you see we get a spinner. Next time, every time we load new data, we get that spinner because there's technically no data that's been sent from the server. So that's that. We can take a look at the code. And what you'll see is that I've actually ripped out everything that kind of makes this remix, right? I've completely done away with all of our loaders. I had to do this. You can correct me if there's another way to do this without getting rid of the client loader, or that allows me to get rid of the client loader. But we've got our use SWR hook with our get cart call and instantiated with a key. Yeah, I'm not going to go too much into how use SWR works, but if you've used React Query or anything like this, which I imagine a good amount of you have, it's all client side. So this is all happening inside of the default components. Same thing here. I left the actions in, but everything here is really just happening on the client as far as loading data goes. So you can see we've got some here to fetch the tags, or sorry, to get the items for whatever the active tags are. Yeah, so here the cons are we have no more SSR. We have a lot of extra code. That's one thing I forgot to mention, is that because I ripped out all the loaders, I had to create a bunch of resource routes. So now we have a bunch of routes that have their own loaders, just to fetch the data that I was normally fetching in the existing loaders. And then I have another API client that is actually just calling fetch to the resource routes. And so there might be a better way to do this, but this is just the easiest way I was able to find. And it's a lot of extra code, a lot of extra time figuring out how to get this to work. The loaders would have just been a lot easier. The other thing we talked about is waterfalls. So we've got our page our client requests the page loads, page requests data, then the server responds with the data, then we show the user content, which is just a lot more back and forth than we really want. So let's look at the code. We just did that. So in truth is the way we were doing it the first time, we were a lot closer than we think. And what I'm saying is that we don't have to do any of that ripping out. We don't have to change really anything except adding a few more extra lines of code. And we can accomplish all of the same things without having to go backwards and do things the old way, right? So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I've got some live coding, and truth be told, I tried this earlier and I found some issues. So we're going to see if this works. Let's see it. I think that was here. We're going to read. Start the server. So we're back to our normal Remix app, and let me know if you guys can see this. And should I zoom in a little bit? Are you guys able to see that? Yep. Okay. So I have installed a library. Can I hide? It was, there we go. So I installed a library earlier, and it's called Remix Client Cache. And the reason I installed the library was just because they made it a lot easier to explain how the code works. Essentially, I've looked through the library. It's actually probably like 60 lines of code to implement what I'm actually using from it. Essentially, you have a hash map, and it just builds out its own mapping system for the client-side cache. But all in all, it's basically the same thing as use SWR, except it allows you to interact with the data sent from the Remix server. So how we're going to do that is let's do this for the shop, right? So this page right here. All we have to do is up by our loader, we're going to pull in, so we're going to export const client loader, loaded function equals cache. Thank you, cursor. Cache client loader. And this is pretty much all you have to do. And I think we need a client loader hydrate equals true.
And then lastly, instead of using this loader data, right? So this is basically going to cache all the data from the actual server side loader. And then when we go to the use loader data, we're going to replace this with use cache loader data. And with that, that's basically allowing the component to hook into the client side cache, pull the data if it's on the client. Otherwise, we'll just default to whatever comes back from the server. And then if we don't default to it and we display data from the cache, once the server responds, we can then update it proactively and display the correct data. So that's pretty much all there is to it. I have a few routes that I got to do this to. So we'll do that for the shop and the layout. So if we go here, this is the layout that's wrapping the page, if you remember. So this includes the kind of the top bar right here, which has to display information from the cart. So we've got some stuff that fetches the cart and the user. So once again, I'm gonna let cursor just handle this. Okay, so we got that. And now if we go down to the loader data, that's the other thing. The library makes this live coding session go a lot quicker. And now, fingers crossed, if I click on a new tab, you see it has to load. We get the new data. And then additionally, if I go back, it works. So you can see that we've literally got all the cache data and we added probably 3 lines of code to make that happen, or 60 or 63 if you wanted to build that library yourself. So this is pretty sweet because now we've got everything that we want. There's the error. Okay, that was gonna come. Don't worry, I prepared for this. Let's discard our changes. And okay. And so now we get this, we get all of our caching right there. So all that benefit of using something like use SWR or React Query has been accomplished. The only difference is now not only are we getting all the progressive enhancement and things we wanted, but we're actually making fewer API calls because all of these are happening in loaders on the server. So all the data that you're fetching is being pretty much collected at once and then sent all together. So it's really only one API round trip. Instead of, say, if I wanted to update the cart, that's one API round trip. If I wanted to update, like fetch the tags that are in the server, that's another API request. If I wanted to fetch, the data from the actual items from the tags, that's another API request. Whereas here, I'm fetching all 3 of those things at once and then hydrating the client with it. So it's actually less API traffic and just a better user experience overall. And to prove that this is working, we're going to disable JavaScript. And now you'll see that we have a fully functioning thing. We can still add to cart. So when I click here, you'll see, let's see, my thing's being blocked, but you saw that updated. Did it update? Okay, cool. So yeah, we've got all the stuff that we need, and we are an extremely progressively enhanced application. So I know what you're thinking. What about my other favorite features of SWR, right? Things like revalidate on focus, revalidate on interval, revalidate on reconnect, the ability to do things like polling and things like that. That's not much code to add either. We could probably accomplish whatever you need in about 30 lines of code or less. Because Remix is built on the idea that you can run your loaders in the background and then update the loader data like whenever you need it. So I'm going to show you how that works. So the first thing that we're going to do is we have revalidate on focus. So let's say you're in your cart, and this isn't necessarily a great example. Let's say you and someone else share a cart, and you're on your page, and then you're off doing something else. And then while you're off doing something else, or you leave it overnight, someone else has added something to your shared cart, right? When you reopen the page, you shouldn't have to refresh the page to get that updated data. And that's what the idea of revalidate on focus is. So if we go here to, what was it? It was cart. I have this function. You can put this anywhere inside of your page, and it just works. I'll go over kind of how the code works briefly, but essentially it just literally sets a window event listener for when you focus. And if you do,
it's going to revalidate the client. And this use revalidate is literally just a navigation to the exact same URL, which Remix is going to handle gracefully. You're not going to see a page load. You're not going to see a refresh. It's just going to re-trigger the loader. And then once that data is fetched, it's going to reapply it to your page. So let's give that a try. So I think I already uncommented that here. So one way we can test this is by doing this. Prisma, what was it? Studio? There it is. Okay. So I've got this. I'm just going to mess with the data directly in the database. So if you see here, I have these cart items. Let's go ahead and clear the cart. And I'm going to open up the dev tools just so we can kind of show what's happening. So the cart's clear, right? We have no items in our cart. We're just going to add a record manually. So we'll select the only cart that exists. That's mine. And we'll go over here and we're going to add an item. So we'll make it the tan pants. And then let's add 6 of them, right? So we've updated the cart. The database has been updated. These changes exist, but they're not showing up here, right? So let's say you sleep overnight and you wake up and you're like, all right, let's see if they added something to the cart. The second you load the page, maybe. Knew something to go wrong. Let's try this one more time. Okay, I refreshed and that's there, but that was cheating. So let's try this again. Let's update this and make it 9. We save the change. We come back. And it's totally not working. That's insane.
Your cursor is in the filter input. Is the page not focused?
Hey, that was it. Oh, it was in this input right here? Oh, okay. Yeah, let's try that again. Okay, let's. Couldn't have been me, guys.
NC, Ryan.
Oh, man. You have no idea. So we refocus, we get that fetch, and then it updates right there. We got it working. So the other feature that's very common is polling. So the way that we can actually handle polling is largely the same way. You just create another hook. So we'll call it revalidate on interval. And then literally I just have a use effect that creates an interval. And then we revalidate on the interval. And then whenever it changes, we just clean it up. And that's about it. So in order to show that, I showed what every e-commerce website a feature that every e-commerce website wishes they had, which is a clock. Not just any clock. This clock is only showing data from the server, as all clocks should. Yeah, don't do that. Let's go here. And we're going to look at ignore my variable names. I had another direction for this and we pivoted. So this is very simple. We have a function that is returning whatever the current date is on the server to the client. We're doing our caching, right? Super easy, but this clock isn't very useful because you have to refresh if you want the up-to-date time. And now this is already stale because if I refresh again, and I can keep doing this, right? But let's pretend this is more important data that is actually changing and is meaningful to show the user that it's changing. Well, using the hook that I just told you about, which happens to be 20 lines of code, we now have polling. And so it's not saved yet, but once I leave this, it will save and you'll see that it actually starts polling right away. And so now you can see we're getting an updated clock every second, which is kind of cool. And so we've literally, if you were to ask me what was everything I've ever used SWR for, like we've just covered all of it. You know, you don't have to use the suspense thing. You don't need to like block rendering in order to get your data to show up on the first page load. And you get to use a SSR. So some obvious pros, it's really everything we talked about. We have SWR, SSR, API caching. We have no waterfalls. And all of our packages start with Remix, which I feel good about. The only cons that I could think of are APIs aren't cached granularly. So if you wanted to say update some data from one piece of the database, but not the rest, that might be a little bit harder to do. There might be a way to do it. I just hadn't found it. And if you want to modify the client cache, you kind of have to set some stuff up to watch and then sync that with the React state. So that might be a little bit more difficult, but definitely not impossible. So yeah, let's ditch SWR. Couple things to keep in mind. You can still kind of accomplish most of this except for the progressive enhancement with SSR and use query, or use SWR and use query. But you definitely lose a lot of pieces of the progressive enhancement. You can pretty much accomplish any goal with any route you take. It's just, you're going to have some trade-offs either way. The other thing is, like I said, I'm new to Remix. I don't know much about it. This is just kind of something that we wrote into at work, and I've been working my way through. So if you guys have anything that you want to add on to this, or let me know that I got completely wrong, please do, because you'll be benefiting me. But yeah, so I got all this information from an article by Sergio DXA and the documentation from the Remix client cache. Thank you very much. Questions?
I have a question.
I think so. When you showed the very first example, whenever you click between tabs on the page, it showed a spinner loading state between each tab. Your final example did not have that at all. Did something adding the client-side caching?
Yes, I was hoping you wouldn't notice that. So it had to do with, let me think, layout. Pretty sure it's in here. Yeah, so I was using the is loading the use navigation state, which basically checks to see if Remix is loading the next page, but since that page has already been loaded, I'm pretty sure it shows it as idle. Brooks, you can tell me if I'm totally off here, but so yeah, that for whatever reason, whatever updates this use navigation state wasn't doing it with when I cached the client side data, because I think it already counted the UI as hydrated or something.
In the final example, you hadn't retrieved the page yet. Whenever
So it had pulled, the loader hadn't finished loading, but it had pulled from the client cache and technically rendered the next. I don't know. That's my best guess, to be completely honest with you. Yeah, that's a good question. I'll probably pick Brooks's brain after that about that.
I have to look the code. I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you know that we have a hook called use revalidator?
Oh, is that? I thought it was a different. I saw someone say you can pull it from Remix utils.
No, so there actually is one in the Remix.
Oh,
it does what you made.
Okay.
You just don't have to do that like
Oh, sweet.
navigation to self kind of thing.
Awesome.
But yeah, it gives you a revalidator, and it also gives you a state in case you want that state to say
Oh,
running
that's-
versus idle.
Okay, I would believe. Thank you. Yeah, so that would probably fix this issue too. But yeah, that would be done with less code then. Yes.
So I have been thinking a lot about like infinite scrolling with Remix recently, and I know that React Query is used a lot for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts about how that would work in this kind of architecture?
That's a really good question. I haven't thought about that at all, but now I'm not going to be able to think of anything
Let's
else.
talk after this.
Yeah.
This is probably something that you covered that I'm not remembering right now. If the user wanted to manually revalidate a request without refreshing the page, how does that work within this model? Because say I want to get new information and I know that there's new information and I don't want you to return the cached value.
Yeah, so I mean that would be as simple as, so we have that use revalidate hook. You just create a button, have the event, the click handler trigger the revalidate, and it'll just happen.
All right. Let's give it up for Ryan again. We're without trap again. Didn't drink any of this. Oh my gosh, hold on. I'm back speaking out. It's getting the rainbow wheel for a second. Nope, I'm still getting it. Oh man, might just have to improv here.
It's not a rainbow wheel.
It's got, I'm colorblind. So I'm pretty sure these are all the Don't tell though.
Florida was the beach.
Where did it go? Okay. Share screen. That's the one. There we go. All right. We're on the wrong page. Okay, so yeah, a couple things. Always looking for speakers. We got a little bit of time until our next meetup. Still trying to work out the schedule, but we're probably gonna, just because the holidays are kind of slow, what we're probably gonna do is next month we'll probably do more of like a hangout, like go to a brewery or something like that, or somewhere with food and drink, and just hang out and have a good time, and probably get Shopify to sponsor at least a round or some food or something. So stay tuned for that. If you got here, you probably know how to get information about this meetup. So just, look out for that. But in the future, be thinking about, what's next. The big thing that's going to happen is by the time we have a real meetup next time, React Router 7 absolutely should be out. I will be really, really not. You're not. So anyway, React Router 7 will be out, and that'll give lots of opportunity for content. There's a couple of like new features that are completely new in React Router 7 that aren't in Remix right now. So there's some thoughts there, and some just other packages and whatnot. If you ever want this list, just reach out to me and I can always give it to you. I can also, if you ever want to talk about ideas, feel free, even if you just have like the inkling of an idea, always happy to talk ideas. But I'm always trying to get ahead of that. So please reach out if you have things you want to present. That's the fun of this, is not just learning from other people, but also getting to share your knowledge and your ideas and things you're thinking through and whatnot. Yeah. And then we also do have a website that is in the process of potentially being updated. That's just hiding over there. And yeah, so feel free to check that out, or we also have a GitHub that's pretty easy to find on that website. There's some discussions about the website going on there. But other than that, one thing I was reminded that I try to do, but I haven't done in a long time, is I try to also give a little bit of space for people to share just if you're looking for a job or if your company is hiring, just because I know everyone's often looking for work and whatnot. So just real quick, I'm going to turn off the recording for this, so you're not like broadcasting YouTube to say, because that could be weird. So say bye to the YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us at React. Nope, what's this called? Remix Austin.
Bye, YouTube.
Amazing. Yeah. Bye, and bye Zoom. Thank you all for coming.